want to take some time and go through the process of setting up PhpStorm to do plugin development for PocketMine-MP. The process is a fairly straightforward thing, but there are some very specific issues that you're going to run into on Windows that kind of need to be handled appropriately and don't really have a lot of good documentation for at the moment. So before you get started, there are a couple of things that kind of need to be taken care of and out of the way. One, you need to be familiar with the process of setting up a server for PocketMine-MP. To kind of get familiar with that a little bit, you can go to the PocketMine homepage, which is pmmp.io. Check out the resources link in the top right hand corner and look for documentation. In the documentation, there are installation links that you can check out. There's one over on the left hand side for just the general installation, but then you have the direct links for the sub items that are available. And with your development environment, what's going to be important is doing a manual install. The reason for this is because we're going to want a copy of the source code available as part of our install that can work with version control, not just in a precompiled FAR file that we would have to change out if we wanted to change our version. So in the installation documents, the things that are really significant here, you need to download a PHP binary. On Windows, you have to install Microsoft Visual C++ Redistributable 2017. A lot of programs use this, so it's possible it's already installed on your computer. If not, the download link here takes you directly to, or will take you to where you can get it from Microsoft's website. And the installer there is fairly straightforward, and the default options work for what you're going to need in PhpStorm. So the other thing that's going to be important is that there is a command down here for cloning the PocketMine repository with a recursive flag, and that's something that's really important because there are submodules in the repository that will not be added as part of the download without that flag. So because we're going to be using Git, it's going to be important to have a Git binary. On Windows, you do not have Git installed by default, so if you haven't installed it already, you need to install a Git program. The one that I recommend is from git-scm.com/download. If you just run the installer directly from their download with the default options, it will provide everything that you need for working with version control with Git in PhpStorm. So the last thing that's really significant about getting prepared is that if you plan on doing any kind of development testing using Minecraft Windows 10 Edition on the same machine that you're doing your development with, we need to add some security exemptions that are going to create some problems when trying to do that. This was talked about on the PocketMine forums, and I'll provide a link to this article and the thread itself, as well as where you can look at the command that we're looking at here. But Robsky110 on the forums provided the solution that we're going to use today to fix this particular issue, because right now if you set up a PocketMine server on a Windows 10 computer and then try to connect to that server from the same computer using a Windows 10 Edition client, it won't connect. It won't even, in a lot of cases, it won't even see that the server is running. And so this command adds an exemption in the security that blocks that so that that connection is allowed. So we're going to copy this command. We're going to open the Start menu, scroll down and find Windows PowerShell, right click on Windows PowerShell, and run as administrator. If you're not logged in as an administrator, you'll be prompted to put in credentials. Once you've logged in, or if you're already an administrator, it's going to take you to the user account control prompt, which is going to ask you if you're okay with PowerShell making changes to your computer. Tell it yes. You're going to get a PowerShell window once that happens. To paste in your command, the one that we copied from the forums, you just right click and it will paste that in for you. Press enter, and you should get an OK message. Once you've got the OK message, we're done. You can close the PowerShell window. We don't need it anymore. And then we're going to go back to the installation documents that we were looking at for PocketMine. From here, we need to go ahead and get our PHP binary. We're going to download one that was already pre-built specifically for PocketMine because it'll include all of the additional modules that may not be in a custom version or in a standard PHP binary. We're going to go back to the installation documents. If you didn't install Microsoft Visual C++ previously, I would just go ahead and double check again. Make sure that you have that. Get it installed. And then we're going to look at one more thing. You need to go to the Jenkins server on the downloads page. From here, go to PocketMine-MP. And we're going to select the devtools.far. This is a plugin for PocketMine that gives you some development options. Particularly, it's going to be helpful for loading plugins from source code instead of having to have them pre-built. Once you have all that, we're going to go back to the documentation for installing PocketMine, and we're going to get the clone command with the recursive flag. Everything up to the hashtag is what we're going to need. So copy that, and then we're going to start PhpStorm, create a new project. We want to make sure that this is an empty project, should be blank. You can call it whatever you'd like. Open your terminal and paste in the command that we copied from the installation documents. This is where having your Git binaries installed is going to be important. If you didn't do that before, then you're going to run into issues trying to run this command because it's not going to be recognized. Otherwise, go ahead and start the process for cloning the repository. While that's happening, we're going to take a look at the project folder. So you can right-click on it and show in Explorer. Then open the project folder. There should be a PocketMine-MP folder. We're going to open that. Then we need to go to our downloads. Wherever it was that you downloaded your PHP binary and the DevTools plugin, we're going to open the zip file that the PHP binary was in and copy the bin folder from that over into our PocketMine-MP folder. While that's happening, we need to make a new folder called plugins in the PocketMine-MP folder, and then go back to our downloads and copy in the DevTools plugin into the plugins folder. So make sure that everything's copied over. Once all of that's finished, we can check our file structure in PhpStorm, make sure that everything showed up. So we can see our plugin folder there with the DevTools plugin. Our bin folder is there with everything we're expecting to be. So we're going to run Composer to install any of the dependencies that we need for PocketMine. So to do this, we need to change directories into the PocketMine-MP folder. So it's cd space PocketMine-MP. And then we're going to run a command bin /composer.bat space install. If you are on a Linux or a Mac OS machine, this will be slightly different. The .bat option is a Windows specific option. So when you run that, it's going to install all of the dependencies that PocketMine needs from other places. Once all of those are installed, we should be ready to run the server for the first time. So to do that, we type start.cmd, press enter. It's going to ask us for our default language, whatever we prefer. And then if we accept the license, select yes. The first time through this, we need to skip the wizard because we're going to get an error whenever we start up that tells us that our configuration does not permit running development builds. So we need to go into our project files, and if we click up here anywhere, it'll refresh the files and show us a PocketMine.yml file that was added during the setup process. We need to open this and change Enable Dev Builds to True. This should be in the first group of settings options at the very end of those options. So you have Settings and then Enable Dev Builds. Change this to True, save, and then we're going to come back and run the server again. You're going to be prompted with the same questions you were just given. So put your answers again. This time, if you prefer to run through the setup wizard and configure it that way, go ahead. I'm going to skip it for the time being. When you run this time, you'll just get a notice that you're running a development build. You'll also see that you're running whatever the newest version of PocketMine is according to the master branch, not according to the releases, which means that you're on a bleeding edge build. In addition to that, you're going to get a prompt from Windows Firewall telling you that it's blocking some features, particularly PHP from the command line. This specific prompt is because you're running PHP from a very specific location that is abnormal. It's unusual. In addition to that, because this is a very unique location for PHP to be installed at, it's probably safe for you to allow this on all networks instead of just whichever one is checked by default. I would highly recommend allowing on public and private on any devices that you plan on taking multiple locations where you could potentially be connected to different types of networks, as this will save you a little bit of headache later on down the road. Click Allow Access for whatever your choice is, and then at this point we should be able to connect to our test environment from a client. If you try this on your Windows 10 machine, on the same machine your development environment is running on, it would be important that you were able to do the PowerShell option earlier, or else you won't be able to see this. But if you click play and go to friends, you'll have listed under LAN games a PocketMine-MP server. So if we click on that and allow it to connect, you'll see down here in the terminal that it is responding to a client connection, and that means that you're connected properly to your development environment. We can see we've got just a plain generic PocketMine server running here. So with that done, we're going to stop the server, and we need to fix a couple of other settings. Depending on what happened during your setup, or whether or not you've tried to set this up in the same folder, or a couple of other potential issues, there may be some things that are kind of not automatically done for you. We're going to take a look at those real quick. So if you open up your settings, take a look at version control, and depending on the circumstances, PocketMine may be listed as an unregistered root. And if that's the case, then you need to click on this where it says unregistered root PocketMine-MP, and then click the plus sign. If you don't see the words unregistered root here just above or right next to the PocketMine-MP, then you're probably okay. This is a good time that if you haven't already set up your credentials for GitHub, to go ahead and do that while you're here. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at directories. We're going to open the PocketMine-MP folder, click on Source, and then click the Resource Root button at the top. This is going to add the PocketMine source code to your library, essentially, so that it knows to look there as part of the project, specifically to the things that you're working at. Click Apply. Then we'll come down to Language and Frameworks, select PHP. In the language level, we're going to change this to 7.2 because PocketMine requires 7.2. It doesn't run on anything less than that. This is going to make a difference in some of the errors that the editor shows you based on the differences between 5.6 and 7.2. So click Apply when you're done, then click OK. At this point, you should have a properly set up development environment that's going to provide you with a lot of options and a lot of features. We're going to take a look at a couple of those things just really quickly. One of the first things that's really important is that you can change branches on your server. As long as your VCS was set up properly with the options that we showed, we can take a look in our terminal and see that we were running a bleeding edge version of PocketMine. At the time that I'm making this, it is 4.0.0 Development Edition, and the releases are in the neighborhood of 3.1.3. So when you're developing plugins, you do not want to develop for bleeding edge. You want to develop with releases as your target. So we're going to change branches to a release version. So if we go up to VCS, we should have an option for Git. If we go under Git and select branches, we'll have the ability to look at multiple branches for PocketMine. We can scroll down and look for origin release. And from here, we're going to select probably the 3.2. Usually whatever the newest release branch is going to be okay to test with. You'll get messages down at the bottom that let you know about the actions that have happened with your version control stuff. So we're going to try running the server again now that the branch has had a chance to change. And we can see that we're now on 3.2 instead of on 4.0. That's one of the most helpful features of having version control built directly into PhpStorm, is the ability to make changes that rapidly. In addition to that, we're going to take a look at a couple of other things. With your server running, because we installed the DevTools plugin, if you need some starter files for creating a new plugin from scratch, you can use a command called genplugin and make a plugin directly from the console in the server. You give it the name of the plugin first. We're going to call this test plugin, and then the name of the author. And it will generate all of the files for you to get your server or to get your plugin started. So we're going to stop the server, take a look in our plugins folder, and we'll see that a new folder was generated for our test plugin. Here we have a folder for our source code. Notice that the directory structure here follows what Pocket's release guidelines look like. We can take a look at plugin.yml. There's lots of information here. And then the main file itself, we can see a lot of fantastic things are already done for you. Particularly, I want to kind of point this out. Notice the little checkbox over here in the top. It's telling us that there are no errors found, and that's really important. That means that our environment has been set up properly. So, at this point, we now have a general plugin that we can start doing some basic development and testing with. We have DevTools properly working. There are a lot of other features that are available now that you have a properly set up environment, but the biggest thing is getting to this point. Now PhpStorm is going to automatically provide some filler options for you as you're writing your code. It's going to do some file linking to show you some of the other pieces of source code as you may need it. It's also going to do a handful of other things for you as far as showing you errors or complications or problems that aren't compatible with the PocketMine source code itself. So I hope this has been informative because we've covered a lot of information. So just some credits to some people who kind of made some of this possible. Robsky110 from the forums, definitely for his provision of the solution that fixes the loopback. In addition to that, Ozzaw from the Pocket community provided me with the first setup that I needed to get mine, my PhpStorm set up and ready to develop the first time that I was learning to do this. He provided a video that showed how to do this on a Mac. It didn't quite cover some of the complications like the the loopback exemption on Windows 10 and a few other little things like the firewall and a couple of other smaller issues. But it definitely was incredibly helpful in getting me started, because if I hadn't seen someone else set theirs up, I wouldn't have known how to figure out to do all the rest of it either. And it's been incredibly helpful along the way. So if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll be happy to do what I can as far as answering those. And as we move forward, I'll start releasing some videos that show some of the features from PhpStorm that are now available in a properly set up environment.